good? Howdy. How's it going? Are we good to go?
You're ready?
I'd like to call to order this meeting of the subcommittee, the Ad Hoc Technology Subcommittee. Teresa, can I have a call the roll?
And Mr. Sleesman?
Here.
Mr. Love?
Here.
And Ms. McPherson? Here. You have 3 committee members present. You have a quorum.
Okay, for anyone who's been to any other committees, this is going to operate a little bit differently and much more informally. We do have a presentation that Mike Lively is going to give us on where technology has been the last couple of years, where we are and where we're going. And then during the public comment section, we're going to allow for public comments, obviously, and then have a bit more of an informal discussion about data use, open data, issues surrounding that. And then also, I think, Mike, we talked, if anyone has any questions, even if it's from the public, during this presentation or during any of this, just go ahead, raise your hand, and we can recognize you during it. We don't have to wait to have a really formal section on that stuff. So without further ado, I will hand it over to Mike, and we can go from there.
Yeah, thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. So it's been about a year and a half since we've had this committee meeting. So today's really going to be kind of a recap of why we established the committee, what we've accomplished over the last couple years, and then essentially what we're going to be doing in the future moving forward. So just kind of as a recap, so we launched in 2019 under, at the time, board member Bibb, now Mayor Bibb, where he was, getting really involved with technology, and one of his big things was, at the time, was real-time data for passengers. And so that was the thing that was really plaguing us back then, was unreliable data for passengers. And so that was one of his big drivers. And then throughout the committee, we wanted to focus on customer-facing technology, knowing that we didn't want to come to this committee and basically talk about upgrading systems and firewalls and delivering PCs, all the stuff we do behind the scenes, but does it actually impact the user or the rider? So we wanted to focus on customer-facing technology. And so some key projects that this committee has championed over the years was our improved vehicle technology, enhanced transit police technology, and then we're currently working on upgrading our fare collection as well. So talking about these 3 items, and I'll go through them quickly. I'm happy to answer any questions. But so one of the first things that Mayor Bibb at the time was looking at was poor reliable data. So riders would, download the transit app or other things, and it maybe be 50% accurate. And so it would show them that their bus or train was going to arrive, and it didn't. And so that was one thing he wanted to get involved with. So we took it a step further. We had some old equipment. So if you look over here, this is what we call a bus in the box. So on the left high-end side there, you can see that was the equipment we used to have on our vehicles prior to 2019. So it's kind of like a Game Boy unit, green screen that you see there for the operator. It's a DOS-based computer that had very little memory on it. And so it was very antiquated technology that we installed in the mid-2000s and that we were operating all the way up into and through 2020. What you see on the right-hand side is the new equipment. So it's a touchscreen tablet, turn-by-turn navigation, a lot of great features, cellular. So it just shows the transition that we made kind of overnight during COVID with the old technology and new. And that was ultimately to solve some internal things, but really to get to that upgraded data for the rider. And so, as you can see on the slide, the parts were installed in the mid-2000s. It was failing continually. It was difficult to repair. We were buying parts off eBay. We were buying parts from decommissioned turnpikes and they were decommissioning their system, and we were buying it as new for us. And I can speak to it personally because I was the one that got the phone calls in the middle of the night to go fix the radio tower. So this was a big improvement for me. And so, in addition to the lack of data, we also had a lack of communication for our operators, as well as we could not see where our vehicles were located. And so the project summary really we won a federal highway grant. It was a 50-50 match. We had applied for the Smart City grant here in Cleveland. Columbus ultimately won. So we took that submission, applied for the federal highway grant, and we were awarded that grant. And so essentially we did everything. We decided we're going to replace all the technology, all the software that's on our vehicles. And so all of our buses, trains, paratransit, we upgraded it all within about an 18 to 20 month span during COVID. So it was a little bit slow at the time, and it really helped. So like I mentioned, you can see kind of the difference between technology just from left to right. And what you see on your screen this is what we call Transit Master or En Route. And so this is what our dispatch center uses to manage our service in the field. So as soon as the buses leave the garage, they take over, and they're the ones managing it, similar to what like air traffic control would do for airports. So with this project, we set out to essentially, we started with, okay, we're going to improve rider data, but we did a lot more through this committee. So I'll just touch on a few of them. So we went from vehicle alarms being audio only to now we have live look-in. So in the event that there was an emergency on the vehicle, we can live look in and see what's going on all of our vehicles. We went from no cellular service to now we have 2 SIMs on our vehicles, one for passenger Wi-Fi, one for our service, which we use AT&T FirstNet. We have significantly improved radio communications. We used to have 4 towers within the county, and now all our radios work through the entire state of Ohio. Our paratransit vehicles, so we used to print out papers and hand them to the operators of here's who you're going to pick up next, and they had these red map books of Cuyahoga County, and they would just kind of drive where they need to be. We installed new tablets on their vehicles with Google Maps, and so they get live updates on who they're picking up, and then they give live traffic feed through Google Maps of where they're going to go. So a significant improvement for them. The new vehicles now have turn-by-turn navigation on it, so in the event there's a reroute, a water main break, or anything like that, we can reroute all of our buses. Pre-trip inspection, so before you take ownership of an RTA vehicle, you have to essentially take ownership of it and fill out a form saying, I've checked everything, the windshield wipers, the radio, the mirrors, everything is in good condition for me to take ownership. And so we would fill out a piece of paper that would go to our maintenance folks. The maintenance folks would take that. If there's any defects, they would put it into a digital system and repair it. And so now everything is done on the tablet, and so they can mark everything on the tablet. It's recorded in a database. We can report data on it. And just in the first year alone, we saved 240,000 pieces of paper. So it was from a sustainability standpoint and an operational standpoint, it was a big success. Predictive maintenance was another thing we did. So we have a tool called Vehicle Intelligence, which is a telematics system. And so we now monitor all of the major components on our vehicles in real time. So air pressure, engine temperature, we monitor in real time. We have parameters set so that in the event that the engine's going to overheat, we actually know about it before the operator does. And so we can actually dispatch and obtain that vehicle before it actually interrupts the passengers and the bus breaks down. And then with that, we also get historical data. So we can look across our fleets and see that maybe the trolley fleet at 60,000 miles is starting to have this defect. So you have the historical data, we can see the trends as well. This is the piece so I say all that to get to this piece. This is where we wanted to get, which was accurate data for the rider. So we did all of that in addition when we had the opportunity through this committee. And so we went from a polling rate of unreliable data to every 15 seconds. On some vehicles, we have it down to every 2 and 3 seconds now, just from other tools that we use, and it's reliable. So most data is accurate, 95 to 100% of the time. And then here's all the data we collect. So everything you could think of on the vehicle, we collect it. So at any given time, we can see in real time, how many passengers are on the vehicle, how fast is it going, who's driving, are they on time, are they behind schedule? So we have all that available to us. And then that top piece so this was pre-COVID, so we knew we had a large digital divide here in Cuyahoga County. And so we wanted to provide complimentary Wi-Fi in our buses and trains, and so we did that. And so then when COVID hit, it was even more important that we now had this available, this information available, knowing that a lot of people leaving school did not have reliable internet at their homes. And so I think it's later in the slide, but we average anywhere between 40 to 60 terabytes of data used on our vehicles on a monthly basis now. So the summary of it, we won a Most Innovative Award for this project. We were the first agency to complete that federal highway grant. In fact, I think we completed it 2 years in advance of the next person in line. Since that, we have 37,000 Transit app users, so that kind of met Mayor Bibb's mission was reliable data. For perspective, we have anywhere between 70 and 75,000 riders a day, and so at any given day, you might have half of our riders now using this data because it's reliable. As I mentioned, bridging the digital divide, and then just reliable data for everyone else. And it really opened up the avenue for other technologies. So since we've implemented this, the fare collection projects come on board. We've partnered with the city for traffic signal priority along key corridors and some pilot projects. We've added infotainment screens on our vehicles, so now we have advertisements and schedule information on our vehicles. So all of that and all these future projects would not have been possible without the support of the committee to champion this project moving forward. So with that one, I'm happy to answer any questions on where we were, what we accomplished, and where we're going.
Anyone have any questions on the past? No? All right. Any comments?
Yeah, no question per se, but just a quick comment. So welcome to everybody here, especially our guests. I did ask Mike, I said, I don't know some of the faces in the back unless we hired you guys in the last 10 minutes. So welcome to RTA. Just a quick comment. We've had a lot of different leadership, especially on the board as well, over the last, say, 4 years. And I think that while the meeting cadence for this particular committee has definitely had ups and downs depending on what else is going on, I think that this is a great time to be able to think about where we're going as far as the technology and the advent of everything going on with the city, with some of our partners, and even with us being able to think about the security of technology. The footprint of what our customers have access to is definitely increasing. So I just want to make sure I can put that in the minds of our board to be able to keep that as an ongoing sort of conversational piece as we start talking about a lot of the projects. I also would suggest, and City of Cleveland, you're here, correct? Okay. To also think about inviting some of your legal and procurement folks to future meetings as we start to talk about software that we may or may not have, if I call it the firewalls, right, to be able to have the bandwidth of thinking about identification and also kind of allowances for blanket procedures or acceptances versus those that maybe we haven't had the infrastructure, but we can't always talk to a person. Sometimes there's blanket contracts that are in need of a particular risk. So risk aversion is something that I think I definitely want us to be able to think through for future as well as we go through a lot of these open data portals and transit applications. And then also kind of buying into a regional sort of aspect of utilizing this information is important as well. I know that Ohio has vastly different transportation systems, all have different capabilities for transit. Some are more sophisticated than others, and sometimes we get lumped into piggyback contracts that might not apply for our particular areas. So I just wanted to put that out there before we get into the nitty-gritty. So thank you.
Thank you. I think with that, we can probably go on to where we are now.
So there's actually a couple more things, just quickly. So one thing that then coming off this committee really championed was coming off then the large radio project. We went right into transit police. So we were in the middle of COVID, obviously the events of 2020, the death of George Floyd, and all the things that brought to the nation, the community. And so we wanted to take that momentum and use that to then upgrade a lot of transit police technology. And so we had multiple things that we wanted to do. We wanted to improve transparency, modern day policing, and to improve the technology to support that. And so beginning at the end of 2020, this committee, with their support, we started the process of purchasing and issuing body-worn cameras for the first time, new radios for all of our transit police personnel, and then new mobile routers. So essentially a lot of the equipment that we put on our vehicles, we then put that into the cruisers as well. And so for the first time then we had body-worn cameras, which I'll talk about, but kind of the 3 pillars of that project. Next door, we have our dispatch center. So we bought them brand new dispatch consoles that have interoperability with city and other agencies. So we work with Brad Hankey at the city a lot. So we have interoperability with other partners throughout the county in the event of emergency. We issued all brand new mobile radios. So that's for our officers, detectives, ambassadors. And then the body-worn cameras was the big thing coming out of 2020 to improve the transparency of our police force within the community. And in fact, we're in the process of getting our new cameras for 2024. So we get new cameras every 3 years. So kind of the system we looked at ultimately was through Motorola. And so what we wanted was something that we could utilize long-term and then provided the highest level of transparency for the community. And so we have, through those, we issued body-worn cameras to all officers. It's unlimited data, and so unlimited storage, so we didn't have to worry about, retaining all that information. We have it available. And one of the great features we had on the cameras we purchased was that they're always recording. So in the event that an operator is talking to someone, something were to transpire, and they forget to press the button, we could go back and retrieve that video. So we can always go back and get something that maybe wasn't captured. And so we have this today. It's been working well, and we're actually in the process of refreshing that and getting new cameras for our operators. But we wanted to use the momentum from the previous project, and through this committee, went through and purchased all new transit police technology as well. And then keeping the momentum going, I have the sample in front of Jeff there. So now, improving technology again. So everyone's heard of Tough Books. Now these are Tough tablets. So we have these and we're programming them now and beginning to install in all of our non-revenue fleet, which includes transit police. But essentially, we're very paper heavy at RTA still. And so what this allows us to do is transition to more of a digital base where, take for example, Chris is here from electronic repair, service quality. So they're in the field. They do a lot of block checks and safety checks where they're hopping on vehicles. They're staying at street corners and they're looking at and recording a lot of things. So today they have their radio. Every day they come in and they actually reserve and take out a digital camera with an SD card in it. And so if they respond to an accident, they're using a digital camera, and then they use a lot of paper. So they're filling things out on paper, and then they're putting it in envelopes and mailing it downtown. And so it's very paper heavy. And so and with that, we have lack of data. So if an operator does a block check and they're looking at our safety check and they're looking at how many operators, were they wearing their safety belts or their seat belts, we have no reportable data on that. So now with these tablets we'll be issuing, these will be in their cruisers or in their cars. They'll have all the software that they need to do their job, and then they can remove them from their vehicle, take it on the street with them. If they respond to an accident, they have the camera, they have the software they need, so everything is captured right there in a software system or database. And then all of that information they collect then all of a sudden becomes data points for us, where what was our compliance rate on safety belt checks in 2024? All that information is now captured where before it wasn't. So we have all these now, and we're beginning the installation within the next 6 to 8 weeks. And then that brings us to what we're doing now. And so that was kind of the past things and current things. And then the biggest thing we've been working on now that is customer facing is our fare collection enhancements. So the slide you see here comes directly out of our strategic plan for the authority. And so you can see on the time frame on the left-hand side there that in short term we wanted to kind of essentially start making some fare changes and then start reviewing and analyzing new technology. We are ahead of schedule. And so we are implementing this now. And then I have a sample of what our validators are over there as well. So our vision for the fare collection project was we had a legacy fare payment app that worked really well for us, but we had to replace that. And so in 2022, we began the process of upgrading that system. We launched officially like a soft launch in June of 2022. So since then, we have now purchased and installed validators on all of our vehicles. So they're on our fixed route vehicles, our BRT Healthline, and light rail vehicles, and we're installing them at our stations currently. And they're also on our paratransit vehicles. We wanted to keep our current fare boxes. So we have the GenFare Odyssey fare box. Is kind of the most famous fare box in transit history, and so it kind of has been around forever. Ours have been around since 2009. They're tanks. They last forever. Chris's department rebuilds all the major components in-house, and so we have a team dedicated that can maintain these for us. And so replacing a fare system, placing the fare boxes on RTA buses would be anywhere between $15 and $20 million. And so that was a large investment. And at the time when we were looking at this, that would have been a full year's worth of revenue during COVID ridership. And so we didn't want to install fare boxes. And so we decided we're going to keep our current fare boxes, analyze technology that is in the market while still making improvements for our customers. And then the thing we're starting this year is the fare capping and smart cards, which I'll talk about in a little bit later. And then Josh is here. So Josh is the director of our MIS department. He works within finance, and so his team manages all the financial systems and software and hardware. And so his team is now currently evaluating ticket vending machines, customer service kiosks, and fare boxes. So what is the next phase in fare collection? So just kind of a summary of where we were from when we started with this committee. So we installed the validators in all of our vehicles, and we're working on the Redline platforms now. We collect about 587,000 per month in revenue. So that's after fees and different things, credit cards, things like that. So that's real money coming to RTA. The return on investment is pretty significant. So since June of 2022, between all the fees and the hardware and everything we purchased, we spent about 2.3, but in total revenue on top of that, we've received 12.1. And so it's been quite a large return for the authority. Which brings us to account-based ticketing, which is really the big thing that we're focusing on this year. And so account-based ticketing transitions away from traditional fare media and cash to more of an open loop system in which you load money into your wallet and then you utilize that wallet to then purchase fares or pay as you go on transit systems. And so you, rather than I'm physically purchasing a fare card, I'm just loading money into an account. I'm riding and it deducts as I go, and then it caps my fare as I go as well. So it's kind of the key driver to fare capping, which I have some examples on the next slide. So what fare capping is and why it's become so popular within transit is that it essentially levels the playing field. It creates a true equitable fare system for everybody, where in today's system, you can actually punish the unbanked or underbanked citizens in our riders. So where you can actually overpay for fare that other people can, if they're fortunate to pay for a monthly pass up front of $95, you may pay $120 over the course of a month just because you didn't have $95 up front at the beginning of the month. And so you're actually punishing our riders and the people that we're trying to serve the most. And so what we'll start to do this year is we'll begin our fare capping process. So we are going to be fare capping on all-day passes, weekly passes, and monthly passes. And so this shows an example of how that works. And so in the system, so think not traditional fare cards. Think of, and I have money on an account, and the system is smart enough to know that I'm riding. And so in this case, you see a rider taps their token or fare payment, whether it's a smart card or a phone. At 7 a.m., they're maybe going to work. They pay $250, which is a one-trip ride. They transfer at 8 a.m., and so we have a 2.5-hour window here at RTA. So in the event that you transfer that 2.5-hour window, it's free. So the system knows that it was free. And so you're free at 8 a.m. You decide to go to lunch, go to a doctor's appointment in the midday. You have to spend another $250, and so you're up to $5, and then your going home ride is another $250. And so you, in current state today, that rider would have paid $7.50. Future state with fare capping, as soon as you hit a $5 threshold, which is our all-day pass, the system knows I'm no longer going to charge you. And so essentially it stops. And so what that allows us to do is basically say you will never pay over an all-day pass no matter how many times you ride. You're not going to get punished because you didn't have $5 up front that day, or maybe you just didn't know you were going to ride as much as you were going to. So that's the example of the all-day pass. As we're looking at fare policies, we're actually bringing to the full committee and the full board fare policy changes on all of this. And at that time, we'll be discussing going from a day pass to a 24-hour pass too. Some other transit systems do that, where we're looking at, rather than, if you buy a pass at 7 a.m. today, it expires at 3 a.m. tomorrow. It's, if I buy it at 7 a.m. today, it expires at 7 a.m. tomorrow. So no matter what time you buy it, it's a 24-hour pass rather than a day pass.
Just real quick, if I could piggyback on that. So great explanation of that, because it is a lot harder to say than I think we realize. One thing that we want to also think about is there's also possibilities to look at monthly capping. And that's where you get the bang for your buck, to be able to think about paying $90, $95 versus whatever amount. And if you usually tap out, I don't know that we've done that analysis yet, but to be able to tap out, let's say on the 20th day of the month versus the 30th or the 31st is where you start to get and I'm doing the air quote, nothing is ever free, but the idea of getting free rides, right? Or capped rides for the remaining week, let's say, or week and a half. That makes a huge difference. And then to your point think about the equity point of view about when a lot of folks get paid. And then also for those folks who may be on assistance, who may be waiting for the first of the month, right? And really struggle to make the payments toward that end of the month. That could also help be able to bridge that gap. So just want to mention that.
And so then I provided just another example of the weekly fare capping. So currently our weekly pass is $25. So say you didn't have the funds to pay $25 up front in the week. And so this shows the example of what a fare cap would look like. So you're paying $5 every day because you're capped at the daily rate. And then by Thursday, you've capped. And so you can ride Friday and Saturday in an all-day pass, but you've been capped at the 25, where essentially in today's state, you would actually pay $35. You pay $5 more a day just because you maybe couldn't afford the pass up front in the week, or you didn't know how much you were going to ride. So it really it creates equity for our riders and those we want to serve. And then once again, we're evaluating, that's a typo there. So not a 24-hour pass, it's like a 168-hour pass. So whatever that pass would be on weekly, an hour base rather than a time base. So the last thing I want to talk about today is just the next steps of fare collection, because this was one of our big initiatives. So we're installing Redline validators at the stations now. So with our Redline stations, they are proof of payment. So our Redline vehicles do not have any type of fare collection equipment on them. And so we were installing validators at the stations. So essentially you would tap and then enter the station. So we're installing to the stations now. We're working on the Tower City validators, so the test units are on my desk now, and so we've been testing those where now all of the turnstiles at Tower City will have validators on them. So current state is that you have to show the pass to the operator. Now you'll be able to scan and then the turnstile will open that you can walk through. So especially during rush hour traffic, big events, it can really queue up, and so we're working on those. Paratransit contractors, we're working through some scenarios, but we don't install equipment on other people's vehicles. And so we're looking at a couple different solutions so that as a paratransit rider, you make the call to come, you book a trip, you don't know what type of vehicle is going to pick you up. So it could be an RTA vehicle, it could be a provider ride vehicle. And so if it's a provider ride vehicle, you shouldn't get punished and unable to use fare capping in the event that we don't have equipment on the vehicle. And so we're working through a few solutions there. And then we'll begin the smart card, which I provided some sample smart cards up there. Smart card implementation, and then the launch of account-based ticketing in Q4. So November, December timeframe is where we're slotted to go live. And that's kind of, we're in an open discussion. So.
I know we've talked about this possibility at least, and I just want to see if it's on the actual agenda in terms of where we'll go in a future state. But we can also, along with the smart cards, inevitably we can get to a point where we can use essentially any card, a debit card, credit card, or even like Apple Pay, Google Pay, those kinds of things for customers, right, to do the tap and pay? Correct.
So the first thing is to implement account-based ticketing and smart cards, and then because the validators are open platform, Google Pay, Apple Pay, electronic payments, it's all capable. So it's whatever we want to do, the system is capable of doing so.
Great, thanks. Are there any other questions on account-based ticketing or fare capping or any of that?
Yeah, thank you for the overview, initial overview, and then kind of just painting the picture of where we are. I guess maybe just for point of clarification then, the idea of sort of gradually transitioning from the EasyFare smart card to just electronic payments, is that more for just the implementation and rollout and trying to figure out that would the long-term goal be to not have a smart card, or would it be smart card or agnostic electronic payment platforms?
Yeah, great question. So we wanted to provide options. And so we don't want to punish any customer that maybe doesn't have a smart device that they could utilize. So we have purchased a significant amount of smart cards that we provide to the riders. And so we'll give them the option. So we're still very cash heavy as an organization, so about 60% cash collection. And so we want to provide new technology, new tools, but at the same time recognize that we can't get rid of cash that quick. And so we'll have cash options. We'll have, you can use your phone or Apple Pay, Google Pay, credit card. And then we also have the smart card if you do not have an electronic device. And two different options with the smart card. You can upload it through electronic payment, like electronic media. You can load it with a credit card. Or we have retailers over Cuyahoga County through a system called Vanilla Direct. So it's very similar to like Giant Eagle and Walgreens and CVS. We can load cards. So if you do not have maybe a credit card or anything, you can take cash and load cash onto your card as well. And so essentially it opens where everybody has an option to use what's best for them when it comes to fare collection.
Yeah, I think that option to use cash, even if to load your smart card, even if you're not using it on the vehicle, is going to be really useful. And we'll still have a cash option for the foreseeable future, anyway, as far as I understand. Are there any questions from anyone else? Right. If not, as I mentioned at the outset. And Mike and I have talked about this, included also in the strategic plan for the authority is an open data portal, or at least some kind of having open data, having data used in a more transparent and public-facing fashion. And to that extent, we'll have a bit of a conversation. Do you want to start, or do you want us to kind of get a ball rolling?
I would say you get the ball rolling.
All right, with that,
your expertise.
I don't have that much expertise. However, we do have from the city of Cleveland, Liz Crow is here with us, and I think may have hand out some materials. And either way, will be willing to tell us, as the city of Cleveland a couple months ago launched their own open portal, which is great, and I played around with it plenty, and I still have probably plenty more hours to dig around in in the various ways that it can be used. So I'd love to hear from her. We do need a mic, so I guess.
If they would just use
I
the
guess you'll
podium,
actually have to stand at the
just
podium.
press the button when it turns green. That means it's on.
But Liz can present to us what the city has done, what has gone well, what was probably difficult in getting it set up, and what we would want to think about in going about this project. We are at the front end of it. This isn't anything that is going to be launched in the next 6 or 9 months or anything like that. But we want to make sure that we're prepared for it. We want to make sure we're thinking about what data we're already collecting, how we're collecting it, and how it could be used both internally and then and in a public-facing manner. And we want to make sure we don't hit any pitfalls, especially those that can be foreseen. And since the city of Cleveland's already gone through this process of launching one, we're gonna hear how that went and anything we might want to keep in mind.
All right, good afternoon. Oop. It's a hot mic. Good afternoon. My name is Liz Crow. I am the director of the Office of Urban Analytics and Innovation at the City of Cleveland. We are a relatively new office in the city. We were founded under Mayor Bibb with the direction of really doing data and analytics as a best practice within city government. One of our major strategic initiatives was, as Jeff said, the launch of Cleveland's first ever open data portal. I want to start by saying this is not a new concept. It is not something we invented in Cleveland. It is something that we have desperately needed to bring into our region. Open data portals have been around since about 2012. They're a best practice for cities. They are a best practice in cities. And in short, the concept is we identify data that is appropriate to release to the public. We curate that data in a data warehouse, and then we feed it out onto our website. The website is data.clevelandohio.gov, and we just make it available. You don't have to call us. You don't have to ask us for data. We just launch that information to the public. I could talk about this portal for hours, so I'm going to give you the high level. Feel free to stop me for questions. There's no such thing as a dumb question on this topic because it took us a minute to get our heads around it. In the early days of developing this portal, there were a couple moving parts, and I do have Dro Sarabian from my team here as well, who is one of our main architects of this portal. So as I wade deeper into these hyper-technical questions, I will bounce them out to Dro. But to begin this portal required a couple of moving things. First of all, it required leadership direction. It required a specific directive from Mayor Bibb that said, this is a best practice. We are doing this. A committee like this can provide that strategic direction that will then begin to push our work forward. Second, we had to identify the technology that would be used in the open data portal. And I am happy to go through the nuances of our technology, but in short, we had to understand what was the best practice for a website or curating a public-facing website, and then what data architecture underlaid that website to help us cure the data. For us, it is a data warehouse. We opted to go cloud-based in a modern warehouse that would let us use the data for other future purposes. For example, in time, if we wanted to do something with artificial intelligence, we built for ourselves a data warehouse that would let us move in that direction. Number 3, and really importantly, and I do not want to undersell it, was the business alignment around what is open data. And this really amounted to a couple of things. First of all, what is open data and getting ourselves clear on what data is public and what data is not. And this at its core was a legal question. And we sat down with our law department and we looked at Ohio Sunshine laws and we said, what is open and what is not? And some of the questions we encountered in talking to business users enterprise-wide were really about, well, that's not public. And then the law department would say, yeah, but it actually is. And internally, we weren't aligned. So we had to write that guidance. We had to get clear for ourselves. And we had to set some policy that says this is what is open and this is what is not. Not every piece of data is open data. We have 4 tiers of categories. Level 1 is open, that is publicly available. Level 2 is what we call operating information. It's not secret, but our team internally calls it kind of the boring stuff. It's the stuff that, how many help desk tickets happened on each individual computer. We need to track it. It's important, but it doesn't mean it's the thing that people are really looking for to understand operations. Level 3 is where we get into compliance considerations. In the city, we have things like HIPAA and CJIS, which are important compliance tools. We've got a number of others beyond that as well. For you, it would be things like you would never release credit card information. And then last for us, number 4 is what I would call restricted confidential. This is data that we would share with our federal partners where maybe you need a security clearance to look at that data. And we have started to look at each individual data system and the data sets within those data systems. So our large systems contain a lot of different data sets. How much of that data is open to the public? How much of that data is maybe has compliance considerations that we need to redact or transform in some way? And then last but not least, in that sort of last pillar, is how did we get the process for our organization and how we get information onto that portal? RTA is a large enterprise. You have a lot of divisions and moving parts. So is the city of Cleveland. New data is always coming to the surface. We knew that we didn't want dashboards made in papyrus font and neon pink that were really probably not very well labeled or clear. And by setting those governance standards, we've actually established an internal committee to help us ensure the data we're releasing is governed. Now, that does not mean every time data is updated, it is redone. It means that once we set that pipeline, we continue to feed data out to the public. I'll pause there. Any questions?
Anyone have any questions about where Cleveland has been with their portal?
Got a quick question.
Yeah.
Not so much as the creation of it, but the usage of it. So how long has it been? Because I remember it kind of flashing on the news.
Yeah.
How long has it been available? And then what's your trackage for usage?
So it's been available since April 2nd of this year, so only several months in existence. Dro, you're going to kill me for not having this number at the top of my head. Are we looking about 3,000 users on a rolling 30-day period? So fairly regular usage, and we are just starting the community education piece. So working with our media, working with our partners in the civic tech community to help them learn what's on the portal, how to better use the portal, have them tell us what things they would want to see on the portal so they can build applications, use it for their own policy advocacy and their own decision making. I think we are seeing some speed pick up in terms of people asking more specific questions, folks reaching out specifically to have training on data sets, and folks who are, we may not even realize they were accessing the data, who are starting to ping us and say, hey, can I get access to specific pieces of information?
Got just a couple more. I'm not going to ask everything because that would keep you here a really long time.
It's okay.
Because you've got, so two major things. Is part of the plan at some point to be able to kind of crosshatch the data that you do have and see how we stack up to other cities that do have an open data portal? And then the other question is not quite as related. Because a lot of it probably does, I hope, reduce your open records or public record requests. How are you kind of moving around, pushing people to the portal rather than filling those data public record requests, you know what I mean, to reduce that workload?
I do. Both are great questions. So for your first question of how we compare to other cities, good data people produce data on the data, and so we're able to look at some other cities' open data portals to see what their data portal usage is. We have Google Analytics on our portal, so we're watching our own portal usage. As we put more on the portal and continue to educate the community, it is moving people in that direction. And we have a cohort of peer cities that we connect with, as well as a convening organization called What Works Cities that is helping us kind of baseline our portal usage, what content should be on the portal, you know, what are good versions of content or less good versions of content. One other note on that content is that we have a spectrum of users, and so some folks really want the raw data. They want that tabular download, they want the API where they're plugging it into their system. Other folks really don't know what to do with that, and so some of the best practices we received was to have both the underlying data as well as some visual component, a dashboard, a map, that is allowing folks to learn from the data without maybe having to generate that content themselves. So we are working to have both, and we're monitoring the usage on where both items are. In terms of your question about public records requests, in 2023, the City of Cleveland had 33,000 public records requests. Long story short, we are drowning. We are absolutely buried. We have called all of our media partners and we have pointed them to the portal. We will be offering training for them later this summer specifically on how to use the portal. We will be offering training at community events. We're contacting community partners to say, how can we educate folks on how to do this? The way I look at my role is the first 18 months was to staff the team and get the portal live. The next 18 months is make it sticky and make that portal stick. My other hope is as the city is leading this charge, it becomes a rising tide for other government partners in the area, such as RTA, such as Cuyahoga County, where we can proactively release more information. And we as a community just have access to more and don't need to do the public records requests continuously to get really basic numbers and information.
How far back does your data go?
It depends on the data set. And so, you know, we will go as far back as our source system goes. So for a system that was implemented in 2015, we will go back to 2015. For a system that was implemented in 2020, we will go back to 2020. We are not going back to digitize paper records into a system. We're just not taking that on. We do. We found it.
Some of us learned how to do research on using microphones.
Hey, Liz, I have a question. So obviously we're providing that much information. How do you guys ensure that people don't misuse the data?
It's a really good question. It's probably my most asked question of how to ensure folks don't misuse the data. And there's sort of two strategies at play here. The first strategy is what I talked about, where you're not just releasing the tabular data, you're also releasing a dashboard. And if somebody were to count up the columns, they could add it up and get to the number that's on the bar chart. So some pretty simple, straightforward numbers, just by presenting folks, the information in a easy to understand and digestible way, we can minimize the risk of folks misusing the data. The second strategy is actually to make it available. So the truth of the matter is that the data has gone out every which way but the front door. It's gone out side doors, it's going out attics, it's going out cracks in the roof, and it has for a very long time, but oftentimes it goes out to one individual person who then reports on that number. That is a different level of risk, and we haven't thought about it that way historically, because when one person gets that number and then starts to analyze that spreadsheet, you have to trust their numbers. But if you make that spreadsheet publicly available, others can check their work. And we have a very active civic tech community in Cleveland. I look to the Data Days group that's been organizing in Cleveland since 2016, funded by the Cleveland Foundation. I look to our media partners, especially groups like Signal Cleveland, who are engaged in this space. They want to fact check these numbers. And so by making things publicly available, we give them the ability to say, this is where I got the number from, and this is how I got to that number. Not that everyone is perfect, but my argument is that risk is in the system already. It's just going out via public records requests. Yeah.
Appreciate the overview this afternoon, Liz. I guess I'm curious, as you see other regions, other cities, like, do you see the more further along communities, like where there's modularity, they've sort of built out shared platforms so that multiple agencies, multiple cities, counties, like are able to really leverage the tool in a way that is not just specific to one community?
Sure. I have seen the biggest example of that model that I have seen is Pittsburgh. And that is that their open data portal is coordinated by their university. Detroit also had a nonprofit for a while that was coordinating the city's open data portal, but that got absorbed back into the city, in large part because it became so burdensome to get the data pipeline set up. It was less about the creating of the dashboard on the front end and much more about the back end curation and system integrations that needed to happen to regularly feed that data out. Our data sets that we're looking at on our open data portal are running weekly. I'm not sending a human a spreadsheet who then uploads it. I'm just integrating to our systems with appropriate governance and security protocols in place with the intention of minimizing the human that's in the loop. Columbus is sort of doing a nonprofit that does a open data portal, and I think they're finding it very hard. That's the last update I got, is it's just a little tricky. So I think it's a project that we can work on regionally in terms of sharing best practices, but the IT team and the technical team and the data teams at RTA are ultimately the owners of your systems, and RTA ultimately needs to govern what data needs to be released, just as the city is ultimately the owners of the city's data systems and our own public records process, where we need to govern what needs to be released. Yeah.
Two more, and then
Yeah.
I'll save the rest. If you could touch on what the city is doing as far as cybersecurity in relation to the open portal, right? And then the other question is, and you have to excuse my ignorance, not being here for decades, does the city have a 311?
We do.
I would think you do. Is it called 311?
It is.
Okay, I always have to ask. Sometimes it's different numbers in different cities.
Yep.
So that, for example, is that data on the portal? And since it is it also, are you creating it where it could be shared with data by 211, like United Way and that kind of thing? Because I know they're working on kind of, I don't want to say open data portal, but that type of thing
Yeah.
there too, and how do the two intermarry?
Okay, two different questions. I'll deal with your first one. Both are very good questions. I'll deal with cybersecurity first. So I don't want to conflate the cybersecurity on the portal with the current cyber incident. Different sources, different reasons, different challenges. For the open data portal specifically, our front end is curated by Esri, which is the big GIS vendor in the area. They do a lot of open data portals. And then we have a data warehouse that sits behind that system. So what we've done is we've created layers of buffer in our systems where we are pulling data from a source system. I would think about like our permit and licensing system. That data gets pulled into our data warehouse, which is an Azure-based data warehouse. It then gets pulled out into the open data portal once it is redacted and clean. So setting security at each of those levels appropriately and setting governance at each of those levels appropriately. That is best practice for how these are stacked up. Many other cities, their data warehouse, a number of them are on-prem, a number of them are hybrid between on-prem and cloud. None of these are wrong decisions as long as those systems are governed appropriately. So from a cybersecurity standpoint, setting governance at each of those levels, but we only push data out to that public portal that is public data. So it doesn't leave our data warehouse unless it's public. Does that kind of help answer? And then in terms of 311, the city is going through a revamp and a relaunch of our 311 program. I am actually leading that effort as well, so good news is I got good updates. We have acquired a new 311 vendor who will set up I'm shooting for later this year. We're picking dates now. Things are a little slower this week than they were 2 weeks ago, just given our cyber incident. But we will set up basically an application on your phone, a website you can go to where you can say, hey, I see an overflowing trash can or a pothole, report it directly into the city. That data is integrated to be released for open data. We have much of our historic 311 data, which was fairly limited, already launching out onto open data. And we'll curate that next phase of 311 data as those systems start to come online publicly. 311 data is a really rich source of data for cities. Our first step is to make sure we are publishing that data to the public in ways that can be integrated with our other partners such as 211. So we have API connectors on our portal where folks will be able to automatically grab that data. They can download it as spreadsheets. We have not set up a formal integration with 211 data right now, but our step one is just to make sure we've got that platform up and the data feeding out to the public. Later in 2024, early 2025, it's an extremely valid question of how do we better communicate that data. I feel like RTA would probably be interested in where are people reporting potholes? The open data portal is just going to tell you that without you having to call us and ask.
So you hit right on why I asked that question. I would love to talk about that. We can talk about that offline as well. I do sit on the board for United Way, and my big push is the 211. So there is a cohort for that. We'll be talking. But I think a big portion of that is for us to be able to kind of get on their roster, right? Because it actually is 1% of their data that has to do with transportation, which I either said means that we're doing everything perfectly and nobody ever has a problem, which I know is not true, or it means that people just don't know to utilize 211 as a way to be able to get transportation help. So I would love to be able to see the 311 complement to that. If you'd be able to share that information or tell us how to get it.
Yeah,
that could be awesome.
Let's talk offline.
Okay.
I can give you some more background on kind of where we're going with this. But the intention is when we really formally launch 311, because the city has had 311 since 2009, but we've never formally launched the program with a marketing campaign behind it. We have allocated, and City Council has allocated ARPA dollars specifically to formally launch the 311 as a tool and an application. And part of that launch is also the release of data. But a big part of that is marketing and communication so people know to use it, what it is, how it works.
Absolutely. if I could offer one thing, and then I will turn off my mic, is alerts. So I'm not sure if your 311 uses that, but that's highly utilized in the transportation industry as a ways to be able to kind of say, hey, I saw this. So that might be an option too as we're going through, or you're going through your revamp.
Thank you.
Okay, I have more of a comment right now. This is great. Some folks in here might be surprised to learn plenty of our stuff is already on their portal in terms of data. It twice in the last few weeks it's come in handy, and a couple seats that I sit in. One including the City of Cleveland last year revamped some of their zoning around high frequency transit corridors, and I had some folks looking at that in a meeting, and sure enough, there's a layer in the city's open portal, open data portal, where you can pull up where those high frequency networks are, and then the thresholds around the stations, stops and stations where the new zoning would come in handy. That I was able to just point them right to that layer and say, here, you can check out exactly in the area you're curious about where exactly those new rules are hitting, thanks to that open portal data. And it probably saved a heck of a lot of back and forth between me and them, and probably actually me and some folks in planning in the city to try to put that together for an outside partner, that we didn't have to do any of that because it was already available. And that's the kind of thing that would come in really handy. And actually, then just yesterday, I was asked about a route by route ridership for 2023 if we had that data, and I said, I mean, it probably exists somewhere, but I don't have it at my fingertips. And I know, okay, yeah, I can probably get it, and that is going to occupy someone. Whereas if there were some kind of open portal, it would just be there. And sure, I don't know what they're using it for, but also the likelihood that it reflects poorly is kind of slim to none, where it's stuff that is out there and they could FOIA or some such anyway. But it saves a lot of runaround when those questions do come up. If someone is wanting that data, they'll get it. They may have to submit a FOIA request, but then we're going through. We probably don't have 33,000 a year, but we probably have plenty. And there's probably a lot of opportunity where we could kind of free up some labor time within the authority. If we went through the upfront investment to set something like this up upfront. Are there any other questions, comments, either inside or from the visitors? I do want to also, first of all, thanks, Liz. We probably have plenty more questions and conversations to have, but I know this meeting at least turned quickly into as much your information as it was Mike's, probably. And we are very grateful and thankful, and I'm sure we can continue the conversation informally or offline here. But I do also want to give time for any questions, comments on any of these issues or anything else, not necessarily on the open data portal idea conversation. If there are any public comments from anyone in the room. No? Yeah, Dro. If you have a, yeah, I could repeat it if it's quick, but if you actually have a.
Just really quickly, you mentioned that you were able to pull up those routes. I think just to help you guys brainstorm as you think about how you want to lead this and approach this and where the value comes from these things is, we're heavily in the record request world, and I'm sure you guys are as well, but another key piece to what you do and kind of how we approach it is when you put that info out there, it just makes that collaboration so much more active and so much more quick, Like you have partners that are dying to build, and policies and buildings and infrastructure near your network redesign that you did, and that was a very big project, and they're dying to do that. But I think there's some lag between communicating where your infrastructure is and where the city's is. So we're hoping these open data portals are bridges to, it's a pretty niche group that uses it. It maybe is not that relevant to all the public to know exactly where the high frequency routes are as a spatial file, but it'll really accelerate, in my opinion, some of those conversations between your policy folks. So I personally made that file for our city planning group because they're constantly trying to work based off of what RTA is doing. And it's made off of the GTFS feed that you guys publish in a very robust way with really clean real-time updates now. So like that infrastructure is there and you guys are already publishing it. So just seeing that final piece of the value of converting it into a document that planners and policy people could use rather than just the pure technical feed is something to think about.
Yeah, that's definitely it. Getting from something you understand, which is that feed, that data file, which I will look at and just look at cross-eyed and not have any idea, but then to be able to digest it in another way where I might be able to do something, whether it's a whatever partner that is. There's only so many folks that will understand those Excel file downloads, or I just get confused, and I know a lot of other folks do, but there's other ways in which processing data that I can actually wrap my head around.
That's one of the hopes we had too with this portal, is that it accelerates that kind of civic conversation too. It doesn't just fulfill, I need info, give me info, but it keeps these dialogues going.
Building blocks.
All right, thank you.
Thanks, Tro. Let's see. Any other questions, comments? Teresa, do we have any web form or calls?
In the back, do we have any callers online?
No callers on the line.
Okay, and we don't have any web form comments either.
All right. Let's see. We don't have any action items. So with that, unless there's anything else from committee members or the CEO GM, our next meeting for the Ad Hoc Technology Committee will be in September. Have we nailed down a day for that yet, or okay? We're gonna schedule an actual day and get that out, but it will be in a few months. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved. McPherson.
Second.
Second, Love.
All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No. And with that, I will adjourn this meeting of the Ad Hoc Technology Committee.